Well, we now know that the UK will start the process of leaving the European Union by March next year, and it's all going to turn out very well. Well, that's according to the British Prime Minister, Theresa May. The Finance Minister is saying pretty much the same thing, but Philip Hammond is at least warning that businesses may feel like they're on a roller coaster. The pound is already weakening sharply after the PM's announcement. And this is just the beginning, as Charlotte Dubenskij reports.
We will invoke Article 50 no later than the end of March next year.
Music to the ears of the Brexiteers who'd urged Theresa May to get on with it. Outside, the atmosphere was more hostile, as were the markets on Monday. In early morning trade, the pound was down 1% against the dollar at $1.28. It fared worse against the euro, hitting a three-year low. And the bumpy ride is far from over. Theresa May had yet again appealed to the EU to start informal negotiations before pulling the trigger. The European Commission has other ideas.
When it comes to Article 50, we will work constructively on the basis of a notification, not of a speech. And until this letter of notification arrives, there will be no negotiation.
Meanwhile, the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, tweeted he welcomed clarity on the start of Brexit talks, but continued EU 27 will engage to safeguard its interests. Now the timetable to leave the EU is clear. The UK can expect more of this. Regulators in France say they're simplifying and speeding up licensing procedures to assist any companies wishing to relocate. There are fears this divorce could cost the City of London 75,000 jobs. And the UK's Finance Minister admitted there may be difficult times ahead. Philip Hammond has now dropped a pledge by his predecessor to create a budget surplus by 2020. The age of austerity may be here to stay, but he says the UK government will pull out all the punches to make Brexit a success.
The Independent Bank of England successfully cut interest rates to restore confidence in the wake of the vote. But as the economy responds over the coming months, fiscal policy may also have a role to play. So let me be clear. Throughout the negotiating process, we are ready to take whatever steps are necessary to protect this economy from turbulence.
And as the UK prepares to say goodbye to the EU, both parties are still walking into the unknown.
And Charlotte joins us in the studio now. Charlotte, the Finance Minister there saying there's a roller coaster ahead. What do you think are the biggest worries for the British government and for British businesses?
Well, if we look at British businesses, it really depends whether you're a small and medium-sized enterprise or whether you're a large enterprise. And there was a suggestion before the vote to leave the European Union that many of the small and medium-sized enterprises in the UK supported the vote leave. And that's because they only make up 8% of the exports to the European Union, whereas the bulk of the exports, which is about 44% of UK exports, are made up by large enterprises. So what they may be worried about is what sort of tariffs there may be if if Britain leaves the EU and there's no deal on the table. At the moment, there's access to the single market without any trade tariffs. And lots of businesses said to me when I was back in the UK a few months ago that that was their major concern, that they didn't know what the future was on that, and that uncertainty was something that was difficult for them.
And that's going to go on for years, isn't it, potentially?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Theresa May said over the weekend that she would trigger Article 50 by the end of March 2017, and that means then there is a two-year negotiation process between the UK and the EU to decide what happens as they decouple. Now, that doesn't mean at the end of that 2 years that there will be an absolute guarantee this is how the land lies. What will happen is Europe will suggest what it wants, Britain will suggest what it wants, and if they can't meet in the middle, that could actually be even worse, because then it will be protracted negotiations when Britain is completely outside the EU.
OK. Now, the Finance Minister is, because of Brexit, having to change course. I mean, he's a Conservative, as was his predecessor, but he's making a break from his predecessor, right?
That's right. Well, the former UK Finance Minister, George Osborne, this was under the steership of David Cameron, had said for the last few years that austerity was the way forward. He was pushing austere measures, cutting department spending and cutting spending in the UK. And the whole idea behind that is that George Osborne had said he wanted to not just only balance the UK's books by 2020, but actually create a budget surplus. Now, Philip Hammond has decided to take a little way of a steer from that path and has suggested that he will look to borrow money and invest money. But he said that this isn't the end of the age of austerity. He says that Britain still needs to look at balancing those books.
But in a way, he's trying to compensate, right,
he just
for the
wants to do it in a slightly different way.
Just want to talk about the Europeans' attitude finally. They're playing hardball here, aren't they? And they're looking apparently to take business and jobs away from the UK. They're sort of making an opportunity out of this.
Absolutely. Within days of the vote leave back in June, there was billboards in London, which you may have seen in the report, of businesses being touted, come to Berlin, it's better, come, we've got startups for you. We heard in the last week that in France, the regulators there are trying to make it simpler for companies who are based in the UK to decide to leave if they wish to move to French soil. So lots of governments, Poland as well, are looking towards companies in the EU and thinking this is a really good opportunity to poach companies now. Whether that happens or not, we will see.
OK, Charlotte, thank you very much for that.